For 18 years, we were strangers sharing a house. When I went in for a routine retirement health screening, a single sentence from the doctor brought my entire world crashing down. Doctor Myers, how did the results come out? I sat in the sterile quiet of the examination room, unconsciously twisting the strap of my purse. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting neat, striped shadows against the white wall. Doctor Rachel Myers was in her 50s, a woman with warm eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. But in that moment, her brow was furrowed as she stared at her computer screen. She glanced at me, then clicked something on my electronic chart. Sarah, you're 58 this year, correct? Her voice was gentle, but it put my nerves on edge. Yes. I just retired. Is there a problem? Did you find something? I tried my best to keep my voice from trembling. Doctor Myers was silent for a few seconds, looking at me with a complex expression. Sarah, I need to ask you a very personal question. Have you and your husband maintained a normal, intimate marital relationship over the past several years? My face instantly burned. That question was like a needle piercing the most secretive, agonizing wound of the last 18 years. It was deeply absurd. My husband, Mark, and I had been married for 30 years, but for 18 of those, we had lived as complete strangers. It all started in the summer of 2008. Mark and I were both 40, and our son, Lucas, had just left home for his freshman year of college. Suddenly, the house felt entirely empty. It wasn't just a physical emptiness, it was a profound psychological void. Mark and I had been college sweethearts at the University of Washington. We got married right after graduation and settled into a comfortable, predictable life in the Seattle suburbs. He was a senior engineer at Boeing, and I taught AP English literature at the local high school. Our life was as stable and quiet as a glass of lukewarm water. There were no crashing waves, but there was no passion either. Then, the year I turned 40, I met Julian. He was the newly hired art teacher, 5 years younger than me. A man whose eyes crinkled beautifully at the corners whenever he smiled. He always kept a vase of fresh-cut flowers on his desk. He hummed songs I didn't know while grading papers, and on rainy Seattle afternoons, he would lend his umbrella to anyone who needed it. He reminded me of the girl I used to be 20 years ago, the girl who would weep over a poem and lose herself in moonlit daydreams. What do you think of this, Sarah? One afternoon, Julian walked into my classroom holding a watercolor painting of a hillside covered in wildflowers. It's beautiful, I said sincerely. Keep it, then. The wildflowers in this painting remind me of you. Quiet, but possessing a fierce, unique vitality. Those words forcefully threw open the doors to a heart I had kept tightly locked for years. We started talking more in the faculty lounge. We took walks through the small school courtyard and drank coffee at a nearby cafe. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. The feeling of being truly understood and deeply respected by someone felt like sweet rain falling on parched earth. Mark sensed that something was off. You've been coming home late a lot, he said one evening from his usual spot on the living room sofa. There's just a lot going on at school, I replied, avoiding his gaze and hurrying into the bedroom. He didn't ask anything else. He just sat quietly bathed in the glow of the television screen. His silence filled me with guilt, but simultaneously made me bolder. Everything blew up on a weekend. I told Mark I had a teachers' conference to attend. But in reality, I had promised to go to a cabin near Snoqualmie Falls with Julian to paint. We sat by the riverbank, talking about art and life. As the sun began to set, Julian suddenly took my hand. Sarah, his words were cut off by a different voice. Mom? I whipped my head around. Standing a short distance away was Lucas. His face was pale with fury, and standing right beside him was Mark. My husband's face was completely devoid of emotion, but his eyes were locked onto me. My mind went entirely blank. It turned out Lucas had decided to come home for the weekend to surprise me. When I didn't answer my phone, he asked his dad to drive him around to look for me. And they found me there, by the river, with Julian. Let's go home. That was all Mark said before turning back to the car. The drive back was horrifyingly silent. From the back seat, Lucas radiated an aura of absolute disappointment and rage. It felt like a knife was being twisted in my chest. When we arrived home, Mark sent Lucas to his room. Then, he sat down on the living room sofa, poured himself a stiff drink, and stared at me. How long? His voice was dead calm, which was infinitely more terrifying than if he had screamed. I'm sorry. I fell to my knees in front of him, sobbing violently. I made a mistake. I made a terrible mistake. I asked how long, he repeated. 3 months, I wept. But nothing happened. I swear we just talked. Enough. He set his glass down hard and stood up. Sarah, I'm giving you 2 choices. 1. We divorce. You walk out of here with nothing but the clothes on your back. 2. We stay married, but starting today, we are no longer husband and wife. We are roommates. I stared at him in pure shock. Lucas has a bright future ahead of him. I refuse to let this impact his life, he continued in a cold, detached tone, as if discussing a corporate merger. And a messy divorce wouldn't look good for your career at the school. That's why I'm giving you this option. If you don't agree, I'm filing the papers. I agree, I heard my own trembling voice say. And just like that, it was decided. He walked into our master bedroom, grabbed his pillows and a blanket, and threw them onto the guest room bed. From now on, I sleep in here. Live your life however you want. But in front of our son, and in front of the rest of the world, you will act like a normal, loving wife. That night, I lay alone in our king-sized bed, listening to the sound of him tossing and turning down the hall. I had expected him to yell, to hit something, to demand an explanation. But he did none of that. He simply amputated me from his world. For the first time, I realized there was a punishment far crueler than divorce. The next day, Mark went to Boeing as if nothing had happened. I couldn't bear to face Julian, so I called in sick. I sent him a single text message. I'm sorry, we can't ever see each other again. He replied with one word. Understood. My affair with Julian was over, but so was my marriage to Mark. For the next several years, we existed in a bizarre state of Cold War. He would brew coffee in the mornings, but never speak to me. He came home right on time, locked himself in his home office until I went to sleep, and only then emerged. When Lucas came home for Thanksgiving break, I put on a cheerful face and asked what he wanted for dinner. He gave me a single, flat look and said, "Whatever," before shutting himself in his room. The atmosphere during the holidays was like ice. During dinner, the three of us sat in suffocating silence. The only sound was a holiday movie playing on the TV. Lucas, have some more turkey, I said, trying to put food on his plate. He pulled his plate away, keeping his head down. Dad, how are things at work? He asked, completely ignoring me. Fine, Mark answered curtly. Good. I'm full. I'm going to my room. Watching my sons retreating back, tears burst from my eyes again. Don't cry, Mark said, his voice completely dry. Pull it together. We have to drive out to Spokane to see your mother tomorrow. I wiped my tears, a chilling realization washing over me. This was my life now, playing the part of a happy family for the world, and living as ghosts at home. As time passed, our relationship froze in place. In 2011, Lucas got his master's degree and found a job in Portland, Oregon. With our son gone, the house felt even colder. I tried to repair the damage. I learned to cook his favorite meals, carefully picked out thoughtful birthday gifts, and when he worked late, I would leave warm snacks waiting for him. But he remained a wall of utter indifference. My efforts never reached him. You don't need to do this, he said coldly one night. We're just acting. You know that. I want to make it up to you, I managed to say. Some things can't be undone, he cut me off. Sarah, I gave you a way to save face. Just live your life. Don't make me regret my decision. In that moment, I finally understood. He didn't just hate me. He had buried his hatred so deep that it had turned into solid ice. In 2013, Lucas married a sweet, kind woman named Emily. At the wedding, Mark and I stood side by side, smiling and delivering our toast. You two have such a wonderful marriage, one of the guests remarked. Mark put his arm around my shoulders, his smile perfectly natural. But against my back, his hand felt as hard and cold as stone. Later, the second the door to our hotel room clicked shut, he dropped his arm. Exhausting, isn't it? He sneered. Yes, it was, I said, slumping onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the absurdity of it all. Mark, how long do we have to keep doing this? Until we can't anymore, he said, taking off his suit jacket and lying down on the sofa. I'm used to it. Used to it. Those 3 words pierced my heart like a dagger. In 2015, our grandson Leo was born. Mark was the one who picked out his middle name. Having a grandchild gave us a few new topics of conversation. We talked about Leo's milestones, picked out toys together, and even laughed during FaceTime calls. Leo, say Grandma, I cooed at the screen one evening. He looks exactly like Lucas did as a baby, Mark suddenly remarked from beside me. It was the first unprompted, personal thing he had said to me in years. Really? Was Lucas this smiley as a baby? I asked cautiously. Yeah. He nodded once, then said nothing more. Even so, that brief exchange gave me a sliver of hope. Maybe time really could heal all wounds. Maybe we still had a chance. I was wrong. That Thanksgiving, Lucas's family came up to Seattle. For the first time in a long time, the house felt warm. Mon Dad, how is your health holding up? Emily asked with genuine concern. We're doing just fine, I smiled. I'm so glad. Honestly, I've always been so jealous of you two. You've been married so long, but you still clearly love each other so much. Before I could reply, Lucas slammed his fork down. Mom, stop acting. His voice was freezing. Emily doesn't know, but I do. You two haven't been a real married couple in years. You just put on a show for everyone. The air in the room instantly froze. Lucas, Mark warned in a low, dangerous tone. You stop it too, Dad. Lucas stood up. I'm 28 years old. I'm not a kid anymore. Do you have any idea how suffocating it was watching you two live like this? Did you really think I didn't know? Emily, terrified, pulled on his sleeve. Honey, what are you talking about? I'm sorry, Emily. I hid this from you. My parents' marriage is a sham. They only stay together to keep up appearances. Lucas, I stood up, tears brimming in my eyes. Don't cry, Mom. His voice softened slightly. I know you regret it. I know you've been trying to make up for it for years. But what about Dad? Has Dad been happy? Have you ever thought about that? I was entirely speechless. What is the point of living like this? Lucas looked between Mark and me. It would be better if you just got a divorce and started over. Dad, you're only 47. Mom, you're 47. You both have a lot of life left to live. Enough. Mark stood up. Eat your food. That Thanksgiving dinner ended in total silence. Lucas's words planted a seed in my mind. He was right. What were we doing besides torturing each other? But I was too terrified to ask for a divorce. I was terrified of losing Mark, even if the only thing he gave me was coldness. He was the last fragment of family I had left. In 2017, I turned 50. The school threw a small party for me. Sarah, why didn't your husband come? A younger teacher asked. He's just tied up with a big project at Boeing. I lied, smiling through the ache in my chest. The truth was, Mark didn't even know it was my birthday. He hadn't acknowledged my birthday in years. When I got home that night, there was a bowl of homemade beef stew sitting on the dining table, still radiating heat. Eat, Mark said, walking out of the kitchen. It's your birthday. I stared at the bowl. It was my absolute favorite comfort food, the exact way he used to make it when we were young. The tears started to spill. You remembered? I just remembered the date, he said bluntly. Don't read too much into it. But I couldn't help it. This was the first time in 10 years he had cooked something specifically for me. Mark, I sobbed. Is there any chance for us? Can we try again? He was silent for a very long time. Just when I thought he wasn't going to answer, he turned toward his office. Sarah, some things belong in the past for a reason. Eat before it gets cold. I sat at the table and ate every last spoonful of that stew. It tasted incredibly salty, and I couldn't tell if it was the broth or my own tears. The year 2018 marked our 30th anniversary. Lucas insisted we had to celebrate it. It's your Pearl anniversary, Mom. It's a big deal. He booked us a table at a high-end downtown steakhouse. At dinner, Emily was holding little Leo, and Lucas raised his glass. To Mom and Dad. Thank you for everything over the past 30 years. I hope you're always as happy as you are right now. Mark and I clinked our glasses and drank. Lucas. Actually, your mother and I, Mark began. I know, Dad. Lucas cut him off gently. But whatever happened between the two of you, to me, you are the most important people in my life. Mark didn't say anything else. He just quietly drank his wine. That night, back home, we lay in our separate spaces. Me in the master bedroom, him in the guest room. The wall between us felt like a physical manifestation of the boundary between our universes. Mark? I called out into the dark. What? His voice drifted from down the hall. 30 years. My voice was thin. Have you hated me for the last 30 years? The silence stretched on. I don't hate you, he finally said. I'm just tired. Tired. That word hurt far more than hatred. I'm sorry, I whispered, feeling tears run down my temples. I'm so sorry. It's all in the past. His voice grew slightly louder. But was it really? In 2020, the pandemic hit. Both Mark and I had retired by then, and we were trapped in the house together. We saw more of each other in those few months than we had in the previous decade. We cooked together, watched the news, checked the infection rates. For a brief fleeting moment, it felt like we were a real married couple again. Wear your mask, he would say before heading out to the grocery store. I would stand by the door and watch him leave. That small, mundane display of concern made my heart ache with a fragile, desperate hope. Maybe we really could hit reset. I was wrong. One night, I cooked a special dinner and opened a nice bottle of Cabernet. What's the occasion? Mark asked as he sat down. Nothing. I just wanted to have a nice meal with you, I said, pouring his wine. He gave me a sideways glance and took a sip. Mark, I took a deep breath. Could we really try starting over this time? He set his glass down and stared at me. A bitter smile spread across his lips. Start over. Sarah, do you think this is a video game where you just hit the reset button? I know I was wrong. Yes, you were, he cut me off. Have you ever imagined what the last 18 years have been like for me? Lying in that guest bed every single night, hearing you breathe through the wall, wondering why I was torturing myself like this? Then why didn't you divorce me? I cried out. Because I didn't want to break Lucas's heart. Because I didn't want to be the subject of neighborhood gossip. Because I didn't want you to be humiliated at the school. His eyes were bloodshot. But you. Did you ever, for a single second, think about how I would feel? Did you ever think about what it would do to my mind, seeing you with that man? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was the only thing I could repeat. I'm sorry. Stop. He stood up. Just leave things the way they are. It's fine. That night, I threw the entire dinner into the garbage, along with the very last shards of my hope. By 2024, Leo was 9 years old. Lucas's family visited a few times a year, and the boys' energy breathed life into our quiet home. Grandma, what were you and Grandpa like when you were young? Leo asked one day, climbing into my lap. When we were young? I stroked his hair. Well, your grandpa was very handsome and Grandma was very pretty. How did you meet? At college. Grandpa chased Grandma for a very long time. I smiled. Does Grandpa still like you now? The question caught me completely off guard. Of course he does, I said, forcing a smile. But it doesn't look like he likes you very much. Leo tilted his head. You never hold hands, and you don't sleep in the same room. Leo. Emily hurried over. We don't say things like that. I'm not lying. My teacher said people who love each other hold hands and hug. All right, time for homework, Lucas said, scooping his son up and carrying him away. I sat on the sofa feeling as if a massive, empty hole had been blown through my chest. Even a 9-year-old child could see that our marriage wasn't normal. Which brings me to 2025. I was 58. The school district's pension program offered comprehensive health screenings for retired teachers. I went in for a full workup, blood tests, x-rays, ultrasounds. You're in good shape, Sarah. Just a slight bit of anemia. Make sure to eat more spinach, the nurse smiled. Then, I took my results to Dr. Rachel Myers, my gynecologist. She frowned as she looked at my chart. Sarah, I need to ask you a very personal question, she said, looking up. Have you and your husband maintained a normal, Intimate marital relationship over the past several years? My face burned. Does that have something to do with my checkup? Yes, it does. Dr. Myers pointed to the screen. Looking at your results, I'm seeing a few abnormal indicators. If you don't mind, could you be a bit more specific? I hesitated, then finally confessed. My husband and I haven't been physically intimate in 18 years. Doctor. Myers looked shocked, then let out a soft sigh. 18 years. She took off her glasses. Sarah, are you aware of the physical toll that can take on a body? I didn't know. A prolonged lack of physical intimacy can lead to hormonal imbalances, a weakened immune system, and an increased risk of certain conditions. Not to mention the significant toll it takes on your mental health, Dr. Myers explained gently. I looked down at my hands in shame. Sarah, may I ask why? Is it a medical issue with your husband? Her tone was incredibly kind. No, it's my fault, I interrupted her. I wronged him. Dr. Myers looked at me with deep sympathy. I see. She typed a few notes. Sarah, I'd like to do a more detailed examination. Do you have time today? Come with me. I followed her into an exam room and lay down on the cold paper-lined table. She moved the ultrasound probe across my lower abdomen, her eyes glued to the monitor. Suddenly, she stopped. Sarah, her voice wavered slightly. Have you ever had any gynecological surgeries in the past? No. Never. My heart started to race. Why do you ask? Dr. Myers didn't answer right away. She continued scanning. After what felt like an eternity, she set the instrument down. You can get dressed. Let's talk in my office. When I sat down, she handed me a cup of water. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. She took a deep breath. The ultrasound shows clear signs of surgical scarring on your uterus. That's impossible, I cried. I've never had surgery. The results are very definitive. Dr. Myers pulled up the imaging on her screen. Do you see this here? This is obvious scar tissue. She paused, her expression turning gravely serious. And given the location and shape of the scarring, this looks like a procedure that was done a very, very long time ago. She stared directly at me. Sarah, do you truly have absolutely no memory of this? My mind was spinning. Surgery? What surgery? Could it be a mistake? I grasped at a final thread of hope. No. Dr. Myers shook her head. The imaging is too clear. It is not a mistake. Sarah, I suggest you go home and think very carefully about your medical history, or perhaps ask your family. I walked out of the clinic in a daze. The doctor's words echoed in my head, surgical scar tissue. A very long time ago. Suddenly, piercing through the fog in my mind, a memory surfaced. 2008. After everything blew up with Julian, I suffered from severe panic attacks. I couldn't sleep, so I was prescribed Ambien. I remembered waking up one morning in the hospital with a dull, throbbing pain in my lower abdomen. The doctors had pumped my stomach. I had always assumed the abdominal pain was just a heavy period brought on by the stress. No, it couldn't be. The more I thought about it, the more panicked I became. I hailed a cab and rushed home. Mark was sitting in the living room, reading the newspaper. You're back, he said without looking up. Mark. I stood directly in front of him. I have to ask you something. And you have to tell me the truth. He finally looked up, frowning when he saw the look on my face. What is it? In 2008, did I have surgery? The color instantly drained from his face. He stood up so fast that the newspaper fell to the floor. My heart sank like a stone. It was true. I had surgery, and I didn't even know it. What kind of surgery was it? My voice trembled violently. Why don't I remember anything? Mark turned his back to me. His shoulders were shaking, as if he were trying to suppress a massive, crushing weight. Do you really want to know? His voice was deathly low. Tell me. I practically screamed. He was silent for a long time. Just as I opened my mouth to demand an answer again, he whipped around. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with an ancient, raw agony. A few weeks after I caught you cheating, you took too many sleeping pills, his voice shook. I found you and rushed you to the ER. They had to pump your stomach. While they were running tests, the doctor came out and told me, "You were pregnant." The room spun. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Pregnant? I was pregnant? Who? I could barely form the words. Whose baby was it? Mark let out a broken, bitter laugh. The doctor said you were 3 months along. Tears finally spilled from his eyes. You do the math, Sarah. At that point, we hadn't touched each other in 6 months. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the sofa. 3 months. We hadn't been intimate in 6. The baby was Julian's. I was really pregnant? I still couldn't believe it. Then, what about the baby? What happened to it? Mark closed his eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks. The pills were destroying your system. The doctors said the toxicity and the treatments to save your life would severely compromise the fetus. They needed a medical proxy to intervene. I told the doctor to terminate the pregnancy. His voice sounded like it was being dragged up from hell. While you were unconscious, I signed the consent forms. I had them abort the baby. My mind went entirely blank. I had been carrying Julian's child, and Mark had ended the pregnancy while I was passed out. How could you? I whispered. How could you do that? How could I do that? Mark suddenly roared. How dare you ask me how I could do that? Sarah, you were carrying another man's child. What was I supposed to do? Was I supposed to let you have it? Was I supposed to let the whole damn world know my wife cheated on me and had another man's bastard? His words slashed at me like razors. But it was a life. A life. A life. Mark sneered. Did you think about the life of our family when you were sleeping with him? When you were in bed with that guy, did you ever stop to think that Lucas needed a whole, happy home? I had no answer. He was right. Everything was my fault. Then why didn't you tell me? I sobbed hysterically. Why did you hide it from me? Tell you? Mark wiped his face. Tell you what? So you could feel more guilty? So you could suffer more? Or so you could hate me even more? I wouldn't have hated you. Yes, you would have, he cut me off. You would have hated me for taking away your right to be a mother to that child. You would have hated me for making that choice while you were unconscious. So I decided not to say a word. I thought you would never know. I thought this secret would be buried by time. But I know now, I shrieked, completely breaking down. You know? Fine. You know now, Mark stared at me. The mix of exhaustion and pain on his face was agonizing. Yeah, now you know. His voice dropped to a whisper. So what are you going to do about it? What do you want to do? Are you going to hate me? Are you going to forgive me? He stepped closer, his voice rising with every syllable. Or do you want to go track down that art teacher and tell him you once carried his kid? No. Sarah. Some things belong in the past for a reason. Mark turned away. Just pretend you don't know. We can keep living like this. I can't, I screamed. I can't pretend I don't know. Then what do you want? He spun back around. A divorce? Fine. Let's go file the papers right now. I froze. A divorce. Was this really how it ends? Right at that moment, Mark's cell phone rang. He answered it, and his face instantly transformed. What? Lucas was in an accident? My heart plummeted. Okay, we're coming right now. He hung up the phone and looked at me, his face the color of ash. Lucas was hit by a car. He's in emergency surgery at Harborview. My mind blanked out again. Nothing else mattered. I scrambled after Mark as he sprinted out the door. On the way to the hospital, Mark gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He's going to be okay, my voice shook. Lucas will be okay. Mark didn't answer. He just pressed his foot harder onto the gas pedal. When we rushed into the emergency wing, Emily was standing outside the surgical ICU doors, holding Leo. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Mon, Dad. She sobbed when she saw us. Lucas stepped into the street to pull a kid out of the way, and a car hit him. My knees buckled, and I nearly collapsed. Mark caught me, then immediately approached the trauma surgeon who was walking out. Doctor, how is my son? The surgeon pulled down his mask. His expression was grim. The patient is in critical condition. We are doing everything we can. He paused. but we have a major issue. He's suffering from severe internal hemorrhaging and needs an immediate transfusion. The problem is, he has a rare blood type, and the hospital blood bank supply is critically low. A rare blood type? Mark asked, stunned. What type? B negative, the doctor said. It's direct donation from an immediate family member is the fastest option right now. Mark and I looked at each other. I'm O positive, Mark said. I'm O positive too, I stammered. Then the patient's blood type. The doctor flipped through the chart and stopped. Wait a moment. Genetically speaking, if both parents are O, it is biologically impossible to have a child with type B blood. Are you absolutely certain? The air in the hallway turned to ice. I looked at Mark. His face was as pale as a corpse. Are you certain you are both O? The doctor asked, clearly confused. I'm certain. Mark's voice was barely a whisper. Just as the doctor frowned and opened his mouth to say something else, the operating room doors slammed open. Doctor, we're crashing, a nurse yelled frantically. We need blood right now. I'll get on the line with the central blood bank immediately, the surgeon said, turning away. Wait. Emily suddenly spoke up. I'm B negative. Take my blood. The surgeon paused, then nodded firmly. All right. We'll set you up for a direct donation immediately. Come with me. Emily followed the doctor, leaving Leo with me. I held my grandson, but my entire body felt completely numb. Mark stood absolutely frozen in the middle of the hallway, his gaze locked onto the swinging doors of the operating room. Mark. I stepped toward him. Don't speak to me. His voice was colder than liquid nitrogen. Not until he is out of surgery. 2 agonizing hours later, the light above the surgical doors finally turned off. The surgeon walked out, removing his surgical cap. The surgery was successful. He's stable for now, but we need to monitor him closely in the ICU. We all let out a massive, collective sigh of relief. Emily, pale from donating blood, walked out slowly and asked weakly, How is he? He's okay, I said, pulling her into a tight hug. Thank you, Emily. Thank you. Lucas was transferred to the ICU. We were only allowed to look at him through the glass window. He lay there, pale and motionless, hooked up to a terrifying array of tubes and monitors. Lucas, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. Mark stood beside me like a stone statue, silent and unmoving. That night, Emily took Leo back to their hotel to sleep. The hospital corridor was entirely empty except for Mark and me. Sarah. He finally broke the silence. His voice was filled with a hollow, absolute despair I had never heard before. Tell me, is Lucas my son? My heart stopped beating. Yes. What are you talking about? You heard the doctor. We are both type O. Lucas cannot be type B. He turned to face me. His eyes were pools of pure agony. So I'm asking you. Is Lucas my biological son? Of course he is, I said frantically. Of course he's your son. Then how do you explain the blood type? I don't know. My brain was scrambling. Maybe the hospital made a mistake. Or maybe it's some sort of genetic mutation. Do you really believe that? Mark let out a chilling, hollow laugh. Sarah, when you cheated on me, Lucas was already in college, which means, if Lucas isn't my son, it means you've been lying to me from the very beginning. For 30 years. No. I grabbed his arm. That's not true, Mark. You have to believe me. Believe you? He violently shoved my hand away. How the hell can I believe you? You're a woman who didn't even know she was carrying another man's baby. How could I possibly believe a word that comes out of your mouth? But Lucas is your son, I sobbed. Look at him. He looks just like you. Like me? Mark's own tears finally spilled over. Sarah, do you know what my greatest pride has been for the last 30 years? It was having a son like Lucas. And now you're telling me he might not even be mine. He is. I swear he is. Right at that moment, the ICU door clicked open. A nurse stepped out. He's regained consciousness. He's asking for both of you. We rushed inside. Lucas lay in the bed, looking at us weakly. Dad. Mom. His voice was faint. Lucas? I grabbed his hand tightly. How do you feel? I'm okay. He looked over at Mark. His eyes were pleading. Dad, there's something I need to tell you. Mark stepped closer to the bed. His eyes were red. What is it, son? Lucas took a shaky, rattling breath, and with all his remaining strength, he delivered a single sentence. Dad, I've always known I wasn't your biological son. The doctor's words had cracked my world. But this was the final, fatal blow. I stood in that hospital room, staring at Lucas's pale face, listening to the words he struggled to push out of his lungs. The world shattered into a million pieces, then violently rearranged itself into something I no longer recognized. Dad, I've always known I wasn't your biological son. After saying it, Lucas closed his eyes, exhausted. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound left, ringing through the quiet room like a funeral dirge. Mark stumbled backward, his back hitting the wall hard. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, his face was the color of a ghost. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I stared at the man I had lived with for 3 decades. I was so used to his coldness, so used to the fortress wall he had built between us. But right now, seeing absolute shock and complete devastation etched into every line of his face, I finally understood the fragile, beating heart that had been hiding behind that wall all along. What? What are you saying? Mark finally managed to choke out, his voice impossibly rough. The nurse, sensing the escalating tension, stepped in quietly. The patient really needs to rest. I must ask you to step outside for a few minutes. But I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the linoleum. Lucas opened his eyes again, staring up at the ceiling tiles. His voice was light as a feather. I was a senior in high school. I was cleaning out the study, and I found your old medical files, Dad. And my original birth records. My blood type was listed as B negative. But on my school physical, you guys wrote O positive. My head roared. I remembered that physical. Lucas had come home looking incredibly pale. When I asked him what was wrong, he brushed it off, saying he felt like he was coming down with a cold. That was 2007. He was 17. I did a secret DNA test, Lucas whispered, a single tear rolling down his temple into his hairline. The probability of paternity was 0.1%. Less than 1%. Dad, I'm not your son. Mark's legs entirely gave way, and he collapsed into the visitor's chair next to the bed. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking violently. Over the past 18 years, this was the very first time I had truly seen him break. It wasn't quiet crying. It was a repressed, gut-wrenching, agonizing sobbing. That sound inflicted more pain on me than any accusation ever could. Who? Mark ripped his face from his hands. He looked at me with bloodshot, piercing eyes. Who was it? I opened my mouth, but no sound emerged. Who was it? I don't know, I stammered wildly. I swear to God, I don't know. Before we got married, I had a boyfriend in college, but we broke up 6 months before the wedding. After we got married, I was completely faithful to you until Julian. But that was 20 years later. Lucas couldn't possibly be Julian's. There was only one remaining possibility. Mark. Every word felt like broken glass lodged in my throat. Before the wedding, I remember now. At the rehearsal dinner, I drank too much. The memories are so blurry. A face I had almost entirely forgotten materialized in my mind. David Barnes, Mark's best friend and the best man at our wedding. A week after our wedding, he moved to London for a finance job, and we virtually never heard from him again. We had barely even spoken to each other. Mark bolted out of the chair. His eyes went from pure despair to terrifying clarity, and then to unadulterated rage. David. He spat the name out like venom. It was that bastard, wasn't it? I couldn't deny it. The timeline fit perfectly. And the blood type. I vaguely remembered someone joking at a college party years ago that David was the universal donor type. Wait. No, he was B negative. You and David. Mark's voice vibrated with rage. You slept together. In my apartment. Right before my wedding? I was so drunk. I collapsed to the floor, weeping. The night of the rehearsal dinner, I was so nervous about the wedding, I just kept drinking wine. He offered to walk me home. I don't remember. I swear on my life, I thought it was just a bad dream. So you married me while you were pregnant with another man's child? Mark let out a laugh. It was a raw, horrific sound. 28 years. Sarah. You lied to me for 28 years. I raised my best friend's son. I made him my pride and joy. I gave him absolutely everything I had to give. You turned me into the biggest joke in the world. I didn't know. I clung to the fabric of his slacks, kneeling on the hospital floor. Mark, I swear to God I didn't know. My cycle was always irregular. I just thought I was late due to stress. If I had known, I never would have done it. I swear I wouldn't have. Wouldn't have what? He stared down at me. His eyes were as cold as a frozen lake. Wouldn't have married me, or wouldn't have kept the baby. I was struck dumb. If I had known back then, what would I have done? I had no idea. Having a child out of wedlock in those days carried a heavy stigma in my family. And Mark was such a good, decent man. Get out. Mark turned his back to me. I don't want to look at you. Mark, get out, he roared, his voice cracking with the weight of a lifetime of suppressed fury. I scrambled to my feet and stumbled blindly out of the ICU. The corridor was empty, bathed in the hospital's harsh, sterile lighting. I leaned back against the wall, slid down to the floor, and buried my face in my knees. For 30 years, I believed that my affair 18 years ago was the greatest sin of my life, a debt I would spend the rest of my days paying off. But now I knew the truth. The affair was just an aftershock, a cruel, ironic echo. The original sin was committed before the story even began, before the wedding march ever played. And I, the sinner, had lived in blissful ignorance, stealing 28 years of Mark's life. I don't know how long I sat there. Someone eventually sat down next to me. It was Emily. She gently put an arm around my shoulders. Mom, Lucas told me everything. Her voice was soft. He said that no matter what the blood test says, you are still his only mother, and Dad is still his only father. I looked up at her young, sorrowful face. Emily, don't you hate me? She shook her head. Hate doesn't change anything. Lucas needs both of you right now. And Leo still needs his grandparents. Mom, some things can never be undone. But we still get to choose how we face tomorrow. Her words were like a lifeline. But I didn't dare reach for it. Did I deserve it? Did I even have the right to call myself Lucas's mother or Leo's grandmother anymore? 2 days later, Lucas was moved to a standard room. Mark stayed by his side relentlessly. He refused to speak to anyone unless absolutely necessary, and he completely refused to speak to me. He looked at me as if I were a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. He looked at me like someone who had annihilated his entire universe. Every day, I brought them food from the cafeteria and clean clothes from the hotel, but I only hovered outside the door. Sometimes, I would peek through the small glass pane. I watched Mark sitting by the bed, holding Lucas's hand, the two of them talking in low voices. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw the tears streaming down Lucas's face, and I saw Mark's bloodshot eyes fighting desperately to maintain composure. It was a beautiful, entirely heartbreaking scene. A father and a son, bound by something much thicker than blood. And I was the one who had almost destroyed it all. A week later, Lucas was discharged. We didn't drive back to Seattle. We went down to Portland, to Lucas and Emily's house. They gave us the master bedroom so Lucas could recover in peace, and Mark and I were relegated to the guest room. We were under the same roof, but we felt a million miles apart. That night, I heard a sound from the balcony. I slid the glass door open and stepped out. Mark was standing there, the cherry of a cigarette glowing red in the dark as he looked out over the Portland skyline. He had quit smoking over a decade ago. Mark, I said quietly. He didn't turn around. He took a long drag and exhaled slowly. Sarah, I've been doing a lot of thinking. His voice was unnervingly calm. I wanted to hate you. I wanted to kill you. I wanted to burn everything to the ground and just end it. My chest tightened painfully. But Lucas talked to me. He turned around. The ember of the cigarette briefly illuminated his face. He said, Dad, the love you've given me for 28 years was real. And the love I gave you was real. That has to be enough. A cold winter breeze swept over the balcony, and I shivered, waiting for my sentence. So, I'm letting you go, Mark said, crushing the cigarette out on the railing. And I'm letting myself go too. Can we go back? I barely managed to whisper, "Go back?" He let out a hollow, exhausted laugh. Every single day of our past was built on a lie. There is no back to go to, Sarah. Then what do we do? Mark was quiet for a long time. In the distance, a train horn blew. A long, lonely sound. Lucas needs time to recover. Leo is still young. He needs a whole family, he said slowly. So, we'll keep playing the part, just like we have for the last 18 years. In front of people, we are a loving couple. We are Lucas's parents. We are Leo's grandparents. And at home? My voice trembled. He looked at me, his eyes completely devoid of light. At home, we are roommates. Just roommates. For real this time. He turned and walked back inside, leaving me standing alone in the freezing night air. I couldn't sleep that night. I remembered him saying those exact words to me 18 years ago. Only now did I realize that wasn't the worst possible outcome. This was the worst outcome. A situation where even hatred was a luxury we could no longer afford, replaced entirely by the tired, mechanical motions of a partnership. But this time, I had no right to complain. I didn't even have the right to grieve. I deserved every bit of it. The days dragged on. Lucas slowly recovered and started working from home. When Leo got off the school bus, he would sprint straight into his grandpa's arms, and then into mine. That child's pure, innocent laughter was the only source of genuine warmth left in our family. Mark was unfailingly polite and unfailingly distant. He said thank you and excuse me. If I coughed, he would quietly hand me a glass of water, but he never made eye contact, and he never said an unnecessary word. We were two robots programmed to perfectly execute the roles of a happy married couple and doting grandparents. Sometimes, late at night, I could hear a muffled cough or a deep, ragged sigh coming from his side of the room. I would lie in the dark, imagining this man, a man who had lived his entire life with such quiet pride, now forced to swallow this colossal humiliation and agony all alone, every single night. And I didn't even possess the right to knock on his door and say I was sorry. When Christmas arrived, we drove out to Spokane to see the extended family. Aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the house with noise and laughter. Uncle Mark, Aunt Sarah, you guys are still so cute together, my young niece said enviously. 30 years, and you still look like newlyweds. Mark smiled and slung his arm around my shoulder. It was such a heavily practiced gesture that it looked entirely natural. Of course, he said smoothly. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. I leaned into him, catching the faint, familiar scent of tobacco on his flannel shirt. He had fully started smoking again. His arm was strong and steady, but I knew that strength wasn't meant to hold me. It was the strength required to hold up a world that was always inches away from shattering. During Christmas dinner, Lucas stood up to propose a toast. Mom, Dad, thank you for everything you've done for this family. He looked at us, his eyes shining. I love you both. Mark raised his glass and downed his wine in one gulp. I took a sip of mine. It burned my throat, and I started to cough. Mark gently patted my back. The gesture was kind, but his eyes were staring at something very, very far away. In that moment, I realized that the ultimate punishment wasn't screaming matches or cold shoulders. It was polite distance. He was sitting right next to me, but he was already a million miles away. After the holidays, we went back to our house in Seattle. Life continued along its seemingly peaceful orbit until one afternoon in March. Mark called me into his office. Sarah, sit down. We need to talk. I sat down, my heart pounding with dread. The spring sunlight poured through the window, casting harsh shadows across his face. I booked a flight to Montana for next week, he said calmly. Just me. My stomach dropped. For how long? I don't know. A month. Maybe longer. He looked at me with an unreadable expression. I rented a cabin. I need some time alone. Time to think. What about the family? Lucas is fine now. Emily is there for Leo. He paused. Take care of yourself. I knew what this was. This was his goodbye. It wasn't a divorce, and it wasn't a sudden, dramatic severing of ties. It was a long, slow escape. From the second he learned the truth, he had been running away. Mark, as he turned to leave, I gathered all my courage to stop him. If, if we could turn back time to the night before the wedding. I, if, he cut me off, his voice heavy with exhaustion. You've said if too many times over the last 30 years. But time only moves in one direction. The mistakes we made, the scars we left, they're carved into our bones now. All we can do is carry them and keep walking. He reached the door and stopped. His back still turned to me. When I get back, we'll talk about what happens next. The door clicked shut. I sat in the study, looking out at the bright spring day, weeping silently. I didn't know if he would ever actually come back, or what his next would entail. But this time, I didn't beg for forgiveness. I didn't wish to turn back the clock. 18 years ago, I thought my punishment was that he never touched me again, that we lived as strangers under the same roof. Only now did I finally understand that was just the prologue. The true punishment was the truth coming to light, building an insurmountable wall between us. And standing on either side of that wall were two people who had been irrevocably destroyed by time and lies. And I, the one carrying a debt from 30 years ago, will spend every single day of the rest of my life paying it off. Whether he returns or not, however our story ultimately